Listen, I'm on here today to talk about the process to pivoting. Now, this is one of our Rest Center Wealth sessions. I've been doing these bi weekly over the past 3 months. And today I want to talk about the pivot because I have seen a lot of people pivoting. Um, I hope you guys can hear me. I'm just going to go ahead and talk. I'm not sure what's going on with my mic, but there was something weird going on. However, I want to talk about the process to pivoting because many people talk about pivoting and we often see the prize of pivoting. We see how they won. We don't hear a lot about the process to pivoting, especially when you are pivoting away from something that was extremely successful, that gained you relevance, respect, and a lot of revenue. As much as we like to say, or the picture has been painted that it's as easy as saying goodbye and walking away, the reality is there's a process to pivoting. And of course, it doesn't always feel good. But I want to talk about why it is challenging, why you experience such a tug of war when you're in that space. Because when you make that decision to pivot, you're not just saying goodbye to a business. You're saying goodbye to people that you have built relationships with. You're saying goodbye to a level of prominence and notoriety. You're saying goodbye to a version of yourself without having clarity on the version that you are evolving into or what is up ahead. And no matter how successful you've been, when you get in a space where you are having to pivot from everything that you've known, everything that has made you who you are, it is scary, it is challenging. And yes, you can try to grit and grind your way through it. But let me tell you, anytime you force yourself through this and don't effectively go through the process, you'll find yourself right back in the space that you're trying to get out of. And I'm seeing a lot of people who are pivoting, a lot of people who are saying goodbye to hustle, who are saying goodbye to hardship. And it's for various reasons. Some are pivoting because there are things that happened in their family. Some are pivoting because the business model began to dry up. Some are pivoting because they started to feel disconnected from the work that they once loved. Some are pivoting because God told them to. There are many different reasons. However, regardless of the reason, it is still a very challenging process. And again, the reason it is so challenging is because you have to admit that where you are now is a place of uncertainty. When you were once the person who had all of the answers, you were once the person that everyone came to. And now you're in a season where you don't even know where you're going, how you're going to get there, or what it looks like on the journey. So you're in a space now where your confidence is shaken, where you were extremely confident in the work that you did, but now you realize you're not confident in who you are. And this pivot that you're experiencing requires you to not only know who you, not only be confident in what you do, this pivot requires you to be confident in who you are, detached from what you do. Because now all of the armor, all of the disguises, the masks, all of the success, the money, all the things that you were once able to hide behind and have this false sense of safety is now being taken away, peeled back, stripped away from you. This position is also a place where your competence is questioned. Now you are brilliant, you are intelligent, you are powerful, you are, again, the go to. You're the person when someone needs help solving complex problems, you are that person. But now you're in a space where your own competency is questioned, not because you are incompetent, but because you're in a space that you've never been before. Have you made a pivot before? Yes, but you've never made a pivot from this place before. See, it's different to make a pivot when you haven't experienced a lot of success. It's easier to make a pivot when you're going to something greater, when you're at the bottom of a place. However, when you're pivoting from a place where you are the token or the textbook definition of I've made it, that's a different type of struggle. So now, because you're in this space, your competence is questioned. And then your courage is challenged. Because at one point you had the courage to go and do whatever it was you believe God was calling you to do. Now, in this space, He's calling you to do something that's different after you had accomplished something that you never accomplished before, and you thought that was going to be the thing. You thought that business model was going to be the end all be all. You thought that career choice was going to be it. You thought that you had made it to the final destination of your purposed path. And so now God is saying, I need you to shift. I need you to pivot. I need you to make a change. And although you have been successful in the past, you still are having a tough time because your courage is now being challenged. Because this time, the reason it's so different in this pivot is because this time you're not just building for yourself. You are now called to disrupt systems, dismantle structures that oppose the ultimate purpose in which you were created on this earth. And I think that God is so strategic in that because He allows us to go on a journey. And when we're on the journey, we're just trying to get out of the place that we were in. We're trying to do things because we want our lives to be better. And God allows us to go forth and have success in that. And however, once we reach that level of success or a certain level of success in that area, God is saying, now I need you to shift and pivot into your ultimate assignment, which is completely different from that first pivot, that first shift that you made. And so when you're in this space, it's a back and forth between the comfort of what was, right? The clarity you had about who you are. Because how many of us can say that, man, I know who I am. However, when we make this pivot, even the very identity that we thought we knew, God starts to reveal to us that there was a part of that identity was not our truest identity. Hey, Shantae. A part of that identity was built on survival. Most of us don't even realize until we make that pivot that we've actually been operating in a survival-based identity, which is also a performance-based identity. We don't even realize that that's what we've been operating in. And it's not until we get to that level of success, and then God says, okay, now I need you to pivot. And it's so uncomfortable because you don't realize until He tells you to pivot that you've actually found your identity in what you do. You found your identity in the things. You found your identity in your skill set. You found your identity in your ability to strategize. You found your identity in how much money you had in your bank account. You found your identity in the communities that you have become a part of, the rooms that you are now able to enter that you weren't able to enter before. You have found your identity and how well you were applauded and the accolades that you can look at on your wall. That's why that shift, that's why the pivot is so uncomfortable because it starts to reveal to you the truth that your accomplishments did not allow you to see. They didn't allow you to see it. And when you make that pivot, here's where a lot of people mess up at. Instead of them tuning up, they start to try to tune in. Now, let me help you with what I mean by this. We start looking at within saying, what is it that I need to do? Instead of looking up and saying, God, what is it that you have created me to do? What is it that you have put on my life to do that is going to disrupt and dismantle systems that oppose your original purpose and plan for my life? So we start to look in and we start to think about ourselves instead of looking up and seeing are we being guided in this particular season in our lives, right? And so this is why when I'm taking my clients through this process, because many of the clients that come to me, they're coming to me in their pivot season. So what happens is either things that they were doing no longer work the way that they used to work, where there was overflow, things start to dry up, or they start just feeling really disconnected. And this disconnection can all it's not just within themselves, but this disconnection starts with the work that they're doing that they once loved. This disconnection even starts in their family. They start feeling isolated and disconnected from their family, their friends. It seems like nothing makes them happy, nothing satisfies them anymore, no matter how much they accomplish. And so they start feeling this disconnection, right? And so most of the times when they're in this space of disconnection, they start trying to figure out what else they can do externally to satisfy this discontentment, this disconnected feeling that they are experiencing. But a part of the process for your pivot is number one, it is reconnecting with your creator, reconnecting with God, the one who created you. Why? Because one, he knows you like no one else. Two, he's the one that has the keys, the blueprint, the insight, and the instructions. And three, because that is where your assignment was originally from. And when you're trying to figure it out outside of him, you're still going to be confused. And even if you go forth and have some success doing some other things, it will be temporary success and temporary satisfaction. Okay. And so the hardest part about this whole pivot process is as I said, you are going to have to relearn everything you thought you knew about yourself, but also who God is. And even if you've been in church all your life, right? You grow up in church, you have the lingo, you have the things down pat. It doesn't matter because this process within the pivot is about shifting from seeking God's hand to seeking him, from seeking him from seeking his hand to seeking his heart. Okay? It is really going to be about you shifting from what can I get from God and truly allowing God to govern your life. So, and it's different because your prayers are going to shift. Most of the times we don't even realize that our whole relationship with God has been transactional. We approach him with the what's in it for me mentality. I'm going to do this so you can do that. And that transactional relationship is why you find yourself in the space that you're in now. And you're in this place where he's saying, I need you to do well, I'm going to say, yes, do something different, but I need you to do what you've been destined to do, what you've been designed to do. Okay. And so it requires a different type of relationship that is not transactional, is truly transformational because you're shifting from seeking the hand of God to seeking him and seeking the heart of God. And it's so challenging because your instinct is to go to him to figure out what is it that what do I need to do because your human nature is to just get out of any uncomfortable situation as fast as you can. That's human nature because nobody wants to be uncomfortable. However, the uncomfortable unlocks the uncommon. I want y'all to put that in the comments. The uncomfortable unlocks the uncommon. What do I mean by uncommon? The uncommon wealth, the uncommon access, the uncommon opportunities, the uncommon levels of success. The uncomfortable unlocks the uncommon. And when you have been called to do something of greater magnitude, it requires you to get in a place of being uncomfortable. However, when you're in that uncomfortable situation, in that uncomfortable space, your goal cannot be to hurry up and get out of it. Your goal in the uncomfortable space is about becoming, not becoming, unbecoming who you thought you were to be who you always have been called to be. I'm going to say that again. In the uncomfortable space, the goal is not for you to hurry up and get out of it because you just want to feel better. It is about you unbecoming who you thought you needed to be so that you can be who you were already designed to be. See, most of the times, people don't want true transformation. They just want to temporarily pause the pain. Put that in the chat. Pause the pain. They just want to temporarily pause the pain. And this is why they'll take on any get rich quick scheme. This is why they will follow after whatever's going to get them the results the fastest because they just want to pause the pain. They don't truly want to do the work so that they never have to endure that pain again. So it provides temporary relief. But what happens is you have to keep medicating it. You have to keep putting a band-aid on it. But when you allow yourself to go to be in the process and allow yourself to sit in that uncomfortable space, you're actually going to be healing. Yes, it's like Tylenol when you need surgery. Thank you, Shantae. It's like taking Tylenol for a leg pain when the cure for it is that you actually need surgery to pull out what's causing the root thing that's causing you that pain, right? And so you have to be willing, though, to sit in that space and say, you know what, this is uncomfortable for me. However, I understand that this is also my process of unbecoming, of unlearning, okay, of unraveling. All of those things that got me to where I am in the first place, because it's more uncomfortable to stay in a place that you're not supposed to be in than it is for you to go through the process to get to the place where you ultimately are called to be or desire to be. So you're just choosing your uncomfortable. And again, we don't like to hear that because we're like, well, I don't want to be uncomfortable. But the sooner you sit in it, the sooner you can actually go through it to get to the other side. So this process to the pivot, again, is about the uncomfortable space of unlearning and unbecoming. So, unlearning the belief systems and unbecoming the version of yourself that was built on a faulty foundation, that was built on a false identity, so that you can finally walk in the fullness and the freedom of the thing that you're actually building, right? People have watched me pivot, right? I've made pivots in different seasons of my life. But I always tell people sometimes it's not a pivot, sometimes it's just evolution, right? But the difference between the pivot and the evolution, the pivot is the pull to purpose. Okay. The evolution is just another step in a phase on that journey. It's just a continuation process. But that pivot is a pull into purpose. And a lot of times, the reason God is calling you to pivot is because while you have found success in that thing, it was not his original plan or purpose for your life. I'm going to say it again. The reason that he's calling you to pivot is because what you built, while it may have been successful, it was not a part of the original plan and path that he had for your life. It was not a part of his original purpose. And I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to get ready to wrap this up. But I'm going to say this because this is one of the things that God gave me as I was preparing this. He said, profit is not proof of my purpose. I'm going to say it again. Profit is not proof of my purpose. Put that in the chat box. Profit is not proof of my purpose. What this means is that just because it's profitable, it's not always evident that it is God's plan for your life. And that is why he tells us that we have to remember that it is he who gave us the power to get wealth, right? And the reason we have to remember that is because when we remember that, we stay in alignment with his plan and we don't go off and try to build our own. And the thing is, he's not forceful. So he's not going to force you to do anything. You have free will. And there may be still some success when you build it that way. So I don't want you to I don't want anyone to think that, hey, it's if it's successful, it has to be God. That's not true. That's not true. And I could go deep, deep Bible on it, but I'm not going to do that for the sake of this because I did promise that I was only going to keep these live broadcasts between 15 to 30 minutes. And so I know if I start digging deep into that, we'll be here a lot longer. But sit with that. Profit is not always proof of God's purpose for us. And we have to understand the difference. Now, let me be clear here. I'm not saying that God wants you to be broke. I'm not saying that you will not be financially successful when you obey God. I want you to understand, though, that you cannot use profit as the sole identifier of being in alignment with God's plan and purpose for your life. Okay? Now, there are some key indicators that you are in alignment with his plan for your life. And I'll probably talk about that on another broadcast because I try to keep each live just strictly about what I'm talking about because I can talk, and I love to talk. Uh, but anywho, if you're just tuning in, go back and watch the replay. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. I have been doing these every 2 weeks for the past 3 months. I have one more scheduled within this series. And so I'll continue to have these conversations. But if there's conversations, or if there's a topic, a title, or something question that you would like for me to dig deeper into on these lives, send me a message in my chat box here or just send me an email at info@shamikadean.com. Let me see if I can put the email in here in the chat box. But while I'm doing that, let me know if you have any questions. What was your biggest takeaway from today's session? If you would be so kind to share. Also, I can't grow this by myself. This is a community. I want you guys to help me grow this. Let's grow this community together. Um, if you don't know this community this is the Rest Centered Wealth community. This community is about teaching us how to build wealth that honors God, that sustains our family, and that stewards our family and that sustains wholeness. So basically, Rest Center Wealth is about where wealth meets wholeness. And this wholeness is about wholeness in God first. So that as you're building something that edifies the body, but also builds and advances the kingdom of God. And it doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself, your family, your children, your friends, or any of those things for that. Because my belief, and I stand on this, and this is a hill that I am willing to stand on, is that God prioritizes faith. He prioritizes family. He prioritizes fitness. And he also prioritizes funds. And when God prioritizes faith, family, and fitness, so when he prioritizes those things, he's not going to give us anything to do that's going to destroy those things. And the success that we have is a byproduct of being in alignment with the plan and the purpose that God has for our lives, right? And so I'm building something that I believe is going to restore the family first, that is going to reconnect and bring people back into a right and a close relationship with God, and is going to dismantle systems that were actually designed to destroy those very things, faith and family and fitness. Okay. So thank y'all so much for tuning in. Thank you, Shantae. She says her biggest takeaway was pivot is the pull to purpose. Yes, absolutely. It is the pull to purpose. Thank you so much for that. If you wouldn't mind sharing that, Shantae, and tagging me on your page, if you wouldn't mind, if you do mind, I promise I'm not offended. But that's all I have for today. If you are a part of our paid community here, subscription, you'll get this recap all with some actual action assignments of what you need to do to continue processing through this pivot. Okay. So if you're not, you can go ahead and subscribe. It's only $10. I think it's $10 a month. Yeah, it's only $10 a month for the community on here. And then you'll get access to the previous replays as well for being a part of our paid community. All right. Thank y'all so much. I love you. Thank you for tuning in, and I will talk to you again in 2 weeks.